All right, well, welcome to another episode, Digital Recruiter Podcast. Masoud, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Dude, it's great to have you here. Just give you a little intro for the listeners. You are the founder at Rapha, which is helping founders, recruiters, hiring managers get really high relative signals right from applicants without picking up the phone. There's a really cool story here, really cool tech. I'm excited for you to share that with the listeners. But dude, you have a cool background, man. You've been at Meta, you've been at rideshare apps, you've been at calendar apps, you're in crypto, you've been a part-time recruiter doing a little recruitering on the side. Like, you got a cool background, man. And it's like, when I look at your LinkedIn profile, it's like, this dude's legit. You got a lot of stuff. You got a cool story. Big soccer fan. I love the France jacket that you're wearing. Let's dive into it, man. Let's get into your story.
Yeah.
What? Give us the Marvel origin story.
All right, man. Let me just stretch for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, I took it way back, so like graduated from San Jose State and started one of my first companies. It was a college carpooling app I had going for a couple of years. It was, mainly helping students get together to go to the same place. Grew the team to about 10 people. Racked up some good experience after that. And then shortly after I closed it, I entered the job market. And so I thought to myself, I racked up some good experience, but I was struggling with telling my story a little bit. So I was getting these no replies for quite some time. So I went out and founded another company called Cezanne, which was an audio resume tool where you're able to highlight key areas in your resume and be able to give up to 1 minute of intro, whether it's your achievements, why you took a year off, why you're good fit, and things like that. And I'll get to that in a second when it comes to Rapha. But shortly after that, I was getting engaged right now. And, at the time, the timing of that startup wasn't the greatest. So I needed to actually move on to actually get that design job. So I went on to join venture-backed startups. And then shortly after, went to OKCoin and then landed at Meta, where I was the design lead there for Messenger. I was there for about a year and some change and been really enjoying my time there. But I felt like the timing could not be more perfect to take all my learnings and apply it to what I think needs to be done for the recruiting space, which is actually making it human again through Rapha. So yeah, I think that's the big origin story, but I'm happy to break down what we're doing here at Rapha though.
Yeah, give us the inspiration. So it's struggling to get in the door, struggling to tell the story, which, man, I can resonate with, our audience, our listeners can resonate with. I mean, that's so much of what I talk about on LinkedIn and the power of content, right? For recruiters being able to stand out, especially agency recruiters. Like, how do you compete with the 20,000 agencies in the U.S. and even more around the world, right? And it's the same thing for agencies, for job seekers, for even companies, right? Even HR trying to attract the right candidates. It's like everyone's trying to stand out from the noise right now. And that's like the big thing. So, so that's kind of where your inspiration for Rapha. So, talk to us about kind of the development cycle for that.
So once I left Meta, kind of like I mentioned, Cezanne being that audio resume tool, that was primarily B2C. So like going from business to customers and getting them to make those resumes. But one thing I learned is once you got into those Jurassic ATSs, those stories, that passion, that enthusiasm, the critical thinking, the technical reasoning, all of a sudden gets lost into the matrix because these ATSs are so focused on what's on the surface level instead of the context behind that piece of paper. And so what we're doing differently is we're one of the first two-sided ATSs where we're now able to provide that high relative signal to hiring teams, as well as creating opportunities for applicants to really sell themselves directly to those hiring teams. So, because right now, like you said, in this job market, they're going off of surface materials, resumes, LinkedIn, social profiles. They hop on that first call, cross their fingers, and really hope for the best. But what you see is not what you get, right? And on the other side, applicants are struggling right now, as you mentioned. Everyone has gone to the same school. Everyone has the same job title. Heck, they even duplicated that same resume template. But one thing that they can't duplicate, though, is that applicant's origin story and how they got to where they are today. And that's what matters when it comes to those hiring decisions. So applicants are now able to control their narrative for the very first time, build a source of truth for that hiring team to finally take action on, resulting in giving time back to everybody.
Where are you seeing, if we get in the weeds a little bit, I think one of the questions people will have is like, all right, I see a lot of employers maybe have taken control back from candidates now, right? And so employers think they have the upper hand and all that. Like, how are you leveraging kind of maybe the shift in the market from the last couple of years and still telling employers, hey, we know that you have a lot of people, a lot of candidates that you can pick from, but like this is still make sure that you're hearing their story versus them going back to their old way of doing things.
Yeah, it comes back to where we're at in this market. With the rise of AI, my mom can pass a coding interview. My dad could be the next Picasso using Galileo and other tools. So it comes back to context, right? Context is the recruiting industry currency, right? So if you're unable to back up your rationale or kind of walk through that avenue of how you got to your solutions, no HM, no founder would actually entertain that. But unfortunately, there's other issues that we've been seeing in this market is the whole thing about like, oh, you have a massive gap in your resume. Well, funny enough, the whole, maybe 90% of the world economy has a massive gap, not only in their resumes, but their wallets as well. And so it's hard to contextualize that story behind that little piece of paper that we call a resume. So it comes back to, hey, we're able to give time back because time is money for both sides of the aisle. On top of your good eye of talent, you're now able to qualify them without ever needing to pick up the phone to either do two things now. You can redefine what their first call means, hey, pick up where they left off, or consolidate steps and accelerate the hiring process without compromising your workflow. So that's kind of like, my biggest thing is we're just giving time back to you, more time than any other recruiting tool.
Gotcha. And so because we have a lot of agency recruiters, and I know this is for founders, for hiring managers. How specifically can agency recruiters leverage this? Yeah.
Oh man, that's my favorite because I actually done agency recruiting, and there's a laundry list of things we are not a fan of when it comes to collaborating with HMs here and there because they have multiple things to do. Totally get it. So what's unique about Rapha is you can actually invite that hiring manager. So instead of that agency recruiter reading their minds and like thinking for that hiring manager, you're now able to ask hiring managers during calibration, be like, Clark, what's that one burning question, if the applicant was right in front of you, you would love to ask? And then from there, all of a sudden, you're starting to expand your question bank, coming directly from that HM. Now, having this part of your workflow and your front door, you're now able to mitigate all those risks of like resumes that typically fall through, come through the door that maybe not read the job description, but all of a sudden, having an audio question saying, how would you rebuild Uber Eats backend if you could? Wow. You got to take a step back. This is not a McDonald's drive-through where you just grab and go. You actually have to be a little more considerate and conscious when you're applying. And that's what applicants want. And so when it comes to that agency recruiter collaboration, they're now able to invite them to be part of the hiring team and actually get pinged when an applicant comes in. You're able to collaborate within the comments and be like, hey, I really like what I heard here. What are your thoughts? Without Rapha, this collaboration takes about maybe 3 weeks to actually process. With Rapha, it's async and in real time.
It's interesting because it seemed like it lends itself, which is something we talk about all the time, to really more of the consultative model, right? So if agency recruiters, there's a lot of when they come to us, it's, hey, how do I get conversations? How do I open the doors with hiring managers? And on the call, right? How do I make sure, I think a lot of recruiters think that they're asking the right intake questions and the discovery call questions, and I kind of audit what they're doing. There's a lot to be desired, right? I really focus on getting curious, being empathetic, asking those open-ended questions, right? What's the start date? Why is this open? Really making the business case for the role. And if you start doing that, then you get to the good stuff, right? If you vetted them as someone that's urgently hiring, right, and they're on the same page, then when you get here, you can start to, especially for some of the technical stuff, and it could be for engineering, developers. And we're working on an operations role that, for me, I mean, I don't know that, I'm not an operations guru, so kind of giving, like, it gives the manager that, like, hey, I can ask my, like, subject matter expertise question without having to rely on the recruiter to do all the heavy lifting. I'm like, are they going to kind of figure that piece out? But then the recruiter could leverage that by being consultative. It's like, oh, I take care of that piece of it by, like, you directly ask that, and I'm going to make sure our candidates are answering that question as part of the submittal package. And so I think that's how you kind of frame it as a consultative approach. And as like a value add. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what recruiters can now leverage is they can pick up where they left off and really dedicate their time to those individuals that all of a sudden have the thumbs up from the entire hiring team. So what's cool about it is now recruiters can focus on being present. Now remember, Clark, this is what the world looks like today. 20 phone screens a week. That's 20 different stories, passions, enthusiasms, conversations that have taken place. Typically, people write their notes. Even if you have a meeting recorder, not being able to, like in the transcription, being able to hear that passion, the drive, the critical thinking, the technical know-how speaks volume, literally. Instead of just going off of the notes that were dumped on the HM's desk at 5 p.m. on a Friday, right? And this is a high volume, high revolutions types of workflow, which now you can really just get your spear and just fish from this tiny little barrel of hyper vetted individuals. So it works out in the end.
So I'm imagining a workflow with the recruiter. Does the recruiter do an initial screen at all, or they're just giving this directly to the candidate, and the candidate kind of goes through Rapha and does everything there?
Great question. I think it could go in multiple different ways. So we have customers right now. Actually, I just onboarded someone from Dubai. He said, I'm coming off of this competitor tool because I think that phone screen for us just literally does not matter, because I'm actually doing more work to get him with the rest of my team up to speed. So by coordinating my questions in a certain way through Rapha, I'm now able to eliminate the entire first call and allow ourselves to build consensus and accelerate and move on to the technical assessment. That's one use case. We actually have an agency that I'm working with as well. She has high-profile candidates or clients. Her workflow is a little bit different. Answer these critical questions coming from the HM, and let's pick up where you left off. Let's talk through when you can start, all the nitty-gritty details that really matter. So it's really agnostic to how you want to work and how you want to leverage it.
No, I like that, because, on our end, I've been seeing with some of the stuff that we're doing with connection request messages or in mails, right? Just messaging in general. The salary transparency has been pivotal. We've got a lot of good feedback there. We'd like to give as much as we can in the message. I want to be short and concise in the beginning to see if they are even looking. But then, like, that follow-up, it's like, here's, like, the bullets of, like, how specific as we can be for you, like, why we think as a candidate you would be interested, whether is it remote, equity, compensation, the skills, the challenge, right, startups, all that good stuff. And just the feedback that we're getting, the reply rate is just, like, really appreciative. And so, and I'm thinking for those engineer roles, right, you get that, like, yeah, this looks good, like, what's next? It's like, well, here you go. Get in here and answer 3 or 4 of the technical questions. I can get that over to the manager, because I think there's a little bit of there's recruiter fatigue, right? Especially with engineers and developers. Just like, I got to do another 30-minute here. And then if you're able to show that, like, hey, I get what you've gone through, you're only going to talk to me if you need to. Because guess what? As a recruiter, I don't care about talking to 20 more engineers in a week, right? I just want to find the right one, right? Because there's a little bit of that recruiter fatigue too. We're talking to technical people that aren't invested, right? And so it's like, if you kind of figure out some of those nuances, right, that's how you kind of frame it as a win-win for everyone. Yeah.
Exactly. And I would also make it a big win for applicants as well. Because what's cool about it, those passive folks you're reaching out to, hey, some of them got families, some of them got some extracurricular activities they need to get to. They don't have 30 minutes. Now all of a sudden you can say, hey, let's cut through it. Here's the application. I attached the HM's most important questions where you can actually speak and give context to. And by doing this, we can actually possibly skip like a couple steps. What are your thoughts? Time is everyone's best friend. I'm able to put my daughter to sleep comfortably, come to Rapha and apply in my safe space and really sell myself directly to you. And that's another thing that we've been seeing is oftentimes people think, hey, adding more friction causes so many issues. This is actually the most important part, which is your front door. And it's probably will dictate what the rest of the path will look like because you're giving time back to the individual, the recruiter, and HM. And everything done is async. So all of a sudden, without ever committing 30 minutes, you're able to build that consensus to either stop the process, revisit it later, or accelerate.
What happens when candidates are like, I am not comfortable on video, or I don't know what to do on video, or like the Ricky Bobby, right? It's like, I don't know what to do with my hands, right? The whole thing. How do you deal with that? Like, does Rapha kind of help prep or give like tutorials or FAQ, like all that stuff? Or like, how do you guys attack that problem or potential problem?
So we're mainly doing audio right now. So that's the beauty of it.
Okay.
Videos actually would cause a little bit too much friction. I gotta get my hair right. Got to make sure my shoes in order. Got to make sure like my backdrop is in order. So by using audio, we're essentially doing a pseudo phone screen. Essentially, we're doing the inevitable. You're gonna need to talk to somebody, and everyone's been a candidate. Everyone has ever gone through the process before. So we're just accelerating it and giving more power to candidates instead of just taking that resume and just throwing it into the mix.
I love that. How do you, the audio is great. So how do you measure like success, right? Like before Rapha and after Rapha, right? Because the recruiter is anyone investing in a tool. It's like, all right, what's the before and after look like? So like how do you evaluate that? Like how are teams kind of looking at that when they use use Rapha?
Yeah. So one of the biggest indicators that we've been seeing is how they've been ranking. So let me set the stage for you. When someone applies, there's going to be some ranking systems involved. Thumbs up, thumbs down on certain audio recordings. By them going in and ranking, we consider that actually a success. Let me tell you why. In order for you right now in this world to rank that, you actually need to hop on that phone call in 2 weeks to decide whether or not you want to move forward. By them applying in real time, they're able to save themselves 30 to 40 minutes on that phone call and that 2 weeks of buffer time and being able to actually make a decision whether it's good or not so good, right? And so remember, our success is just giving time back while creating opportunities for applicants to sell themselves and accelerating the hiring process. So that's probably the biggest one that I usually flag is like, yeah, without Rapha, you're going to have to wait 2 weeks. Sorry to say, that's just how the world works until now, right?
Wait 2 weeks in terms of just getting feedback or going through the interview process feedback, or
because everyone's different. I usually say 2 weeks because unfortunately some people might have to wait 3 weeks. I don't know. Like that's not my place to say. But like people have like their own way of doing things. But 2 weeks is the typical like we'll get back to you in a week or like maybe even that build up time. Like let's schedule a call in 2 weeks. So that's just kind of like the rationale behind it.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it can always be different, right? It could be a day or two, it could be 2 weeks, you can see 2 months, right? And by the time the candidate's typically long gone,
Yeah, and that's
What
another
is,
issue.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask because I was looking at earlier. I was logging in, and I saw the Open AI stuff in the integration, and obviously that's a huge name right now, right? The biggest name,
Mhm.
probably in AI. What does that look like? I think that's on deck last time I checked, but what do you envision, and kind of how are you guys going to incorporate that?
Yeah, so when I think of AI and recruiting, it's a very fuzzy line because, you have issues about biases. I want to go on autopilot, but I don't want to crash while I'm using AI to kind of help
Yeah.
me manage and dictate people's future. So we're introducing it in phases, like focusing around how can we give more time back and alleviate uh, the nuances of the recruiting from scheduling, job descriptions, but most importantly, actually helping with audio question generation. So oftentimes, a lot of the calibration calls is around like what are the right questions to ask. Rafa can actually help you based on the job description. So it can give you 3 to 4 good, between easy to difficult, of the question and the description. So you can just copy the link and copy and paste. But in a bigger world, we see Rafa being able to shortlist based on how you recommend or how you rank. Now, it's not a prescription, it's a guideline. You could come off of autopilot any day you want, kind of like how people do in Teslas and stuff like that. But it's more of a, if you want to go on autopilot and allow Rafa to just continue to shortlist and create a recommended list to go through, you're able to do so. If you don't and you want to be less aggressive with it, you're able to tune out Rafa a little bit so you could be more present through your talent pools and things like that. So it's pretty agnostic. So I actually, instead of doing a one-size-fits-all approach on AI, I'm leaving it open-ended for allowing people to dictate how they want to leverage AI.
No, it's smart because I mean the short list can definitely help. I think again inspire some ideas, or okay, the short
Yeah.
list is it's perfect here, or I want to get a little bit more hands on. 'Cause at the end of the day, there needs to be interaction, whether it's through the
Hmm.
inbox or inbox to Rapha or on a call to
Hmm.
Rapha, like however that looks like. You still need that interaction
Yeah,
with
exactly.
the recruiter, the founder, the recruiter, the hiring manager, the candidate. But I love AI is just kind of sparking. It kind of just sparks the idea, right? Sparks the brain a little bit. It kind of just
Hmm.
gets you in there,
Yeah.
gets you thinking, and I think that's to me that's been the best way to use it, right? If I can have it to kind of spark the ideas and the creative process and kind of kickstart it.
Exactly. And like definitely I could see it helping you get to a place where you just swing and hit a home run. That's my best way
Yeah.
I can put it when it comes to how Rafa AI can support you. Like I don't one thing I want to make it clear, Rafa will not be doing phone screens for you. Like there is no robot, there is no one because
Yeah.
my philosophy, our philosophy here is if someone's making a big life decision, like big one. Like this will dictate your kids, your family, where you live. I kind of want to talk to somebody when I'm in the later stages. In the early stages, people have been enjoying how they've been seeing, but I feel like Rafa will always be that behind the scenes ops person to kind of help with scheduling, reminders, unique ways of like articulating. But also, it's going to be cool when we transcribe those audio files where you can have that transcription copy to clipboard to share to people that might not have headphones to listen to the person.
I love the transcription. We use transcription service all the time for like
Yeah.
an AI one for all the time with all our Zoom calls, our group calls, our content calls with clients, just everything, sales calls, and just that transcription is huge.
It is.
And it comes up with some pretty good summaries even for podcasts like this and everything else. Like we kind of put it through the generator and kind of see what it comes up with before we tweak it ourselves. So yeah, no, that's super fun. I want to cover the one thing I saw, which I thought was interesting, was compensation on there, and I haven't
Mm.
really messed around with it in Rapha yet, but that was. I've always talked a lot about compensation reports. I used them with Career Builder back at Aerotech. I know Career Builders, I don't think it's a thing anymore, but that's what we had with a third party partnership, and I use that like crazy to leverage my conversations with clients and really show them like what the reality is in the market.
Yeah.
What's the compensation kind of look like with Rapha? Like, what's that feature like?
Yeah, so you can ask Rafa to really understand based on the geo, like what are the main comp bands from. So it'll start pulling like the job title, the location, the type of company that you're in, the industry that you're in, and kind of find that median of like, hey, this is what we've been seeing between this year's and this many years. This is the median, and starts displaying it based on what you're looking for. So it kind of gives you that instead of you going out of your way to start pulling docs and spreadsheets, it's just like right there, right in front of you. So you could dynamically start typing and we'll be able to flag and let you know that you're at the lower end versus the higher end, or you're right in that sweet spot. So like, we're not going to say, hey, let's bump up those numbers. It's just more of a, once again, a guideline of like just letting you know where you're at in the mix.
Absolutely. Where's it pulling? Is that like a partnership with like some of the job boards, or is that just like from
we have
what AI knows?
Yeah, so being able to kind of scrape like mainly job boards and like kind of like LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has like rich insights and stuff like that. So we always compare and contrast things like that.
Super cool. Super cool. So, I mean, we've covered a lot on Rapha, which is, I mean, it's just like a really, really cool tool. And I think just where like you're all in and just the way you're building it, I know you're super responsive and you're active on LinkedIn, because I think we connected, you commented on one of my posts. And that's kind of like how we connected, right? That was like back in January or something like that. We went back and forth, and I always love meeting founders and talking, seeing different softwares and what people are building. I think it's all just like really interesting in how people are attacking different. There's so many problems to solve, right? And kind of seeing people's different. I see agency owners go to build an ATS, and I go, see you where you have more product and design with a little bit of recruiting, and then you kind of want to build a software that solve some of these problems. And I think it's always interesting to hear some of those backgrounds. But again, I think one of the things I wanted to ask before kind of getting some of the recruiting background you had was you working at these startups, working at Meta. Like, how involved were you ever really with hiring, with your teams and all that? Yeah.
Great question. So I was part of many different hiring teams for Messenger. So I would do loops and like kind of I was mainly part of their portfolio review, where we kind of walk through and kind of just being a fly on the wall, ask questions about their portfolio, walk through. Now the key thing here, if anyone's applying, having clear rationale for your design decisions is critical. So once you're designing, especially at scale, Clark, getting buy-in is, if not more important than what you're building. Let me explain. Once you have a bunch of cooks in the kitchen, people going left and right and sideways, like getting them aligned in order is actually a huge mountain to climb. Because with my team specifically, being able to like pull all these individuals in one place is a plus one. So when I see portfolio reviews and I'm listening to how they were able to convince through data, through rationale, through previous experiences, through research, that is huge. Like the UI is a given, UX, the prototype, but how you got there and how you're able to convince people is huge on the storytelling side.
So it's, telling that story, because, a lot of people can maybe match up or get there on the technical side. But again, it is always kind of the story, right? It kind of always comes back to that. So you be part of these teams. And again, for our audience of agency recruiters, like, what did you see? Did you ever work with agencies at any of the companies, like you worked at startups or
I
don't even know if Meta, Facebook. Yeah.
So
what were some of the like the pros and cons, right, that you saw with how agencies kind of approached and worked with you when you were at the certain companies?
No, I personally haven't had too many issues with agencies. The path is clear, the outcome is clear for both sides. Let's get this higher, right? And so every time I'm working with people, I think I can only speak for myself, but I try my best when I'm working with when we're hiring for our core team. The technical skills need to be there, but the culture fit is just as important. Because you can have amazing skill sets, but if you don't have that culture fit, it usually is like a make or break deal, right? And so usually when I'm calibrating with like agencies, we usually dive into previous hires, how, I sometimes highlight myself, my counterparts and things like that, and find those trends, surface level stuff. But then we go into the contextual stuff, which kind of comes back to why I'm doing Rapha. But like the contextual stuff, like clear rationale, product sense. So what does that actually mean? It's being able to find those gaps and identify them without you needing any hand holding, because that's another clear indicator that you're able to deal with ambiguity and deal with the unknown. I'm telling you, Clark, when push comes to shove, when you're in that make or break moment, true people and their colors will show. So being able to handle pressure, ambiguity is critical when it comes to any type of hire. So making that very clear that people are able to show initiative and all these characteristics. And it's so funny, as I'm listing these off, you can't capture that on a resume, unfortunately. So you can't capture resilience, grit, and all these other things. And so that's usually how I would usually collaborate with agencies at Meta. And once there, they go out, find their sample profiles, give a thumbs up, thumbs down, you're on the mark, and then we kind of keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, it's, as you mentioned, just that you can't figure it out from just the resume. So I always tell people, just get on the phone and figure it out when in doubt. And that's the value. It's the same thing. You can't figure out a rec from just reading the job description, right? You got to you got to work with a hiring manager like yourself and just like, hey, like to make this happen, we got to collaborate, right? I'm going to ask you some, specific questions. I want to learn more. As you said, it's all about context. You're trying to understand the context of how they came to you, right? Why did you go to that agency? Why do you need help, right? You know the context, but you have to be able to communicate that. So a great recruiter, it sounds like the recruiters you were working with, were able to get that first, and then they were able to make the right match, right? Exactly. And I think that is everything. Really, the main struggle people have is they don't search for context first, right? They're maybe searching to fill the rec or fill the role or get the fee. It's like, no, figure out the context, and then you can figure out, is this a path that I want to go down on, or that's feasible to go down on, right? And that's just like that reframe helps fix everything. Yeah.
That framework that you have, if you insert it in any industry, you'll be well off. Like you could be dumped in any place around the world, you'll be okay. Because
I think we just solved business, so we're good.
Solved business. So feel free to subscribe. $9.99 per month. We're here.
Yeah, we fixed your business. Masoud's gonna get the subscription, all the back end set up for our software, because I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, solvebusiness.io. We it's coming soon. Context is king.
We should just get that t-shirt.
That's it. Yeah, context is in, problem solved, you're welcome. Just like a t-shirt. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh man, that'll be a good post. So
I know.
Well, I love that we're on the same page, and it is interesting with the context of like that does solve so many problems. You take a step back and get out of your own head and be like, okay, how do I get the context as quickly as possible, as efficient as possible, and as effectively as possible? For all this, that's why we use all these tools. That's why we post content and everything else, right? The content that provides context on insights, what we know, how we work with clients, right? You're doing the client spotlight on your company page right now, which is super cool, right? Just the video highlighting the clients and the people that are onboarded to you, right? That's giving context of how you operate, who you're working, right? They can click on the company. Oh, that's a company like me, or that's cool. I would want to be a spotlight, or just like everything we're doing with content, and this is trying to give people context. I think thinking in that framework, it just like changes how your behavior, in a sense, when you realize like that's what people need to make a buying decision.
Exactly. And I feel like, remember, like by understanding the context, you're able to dictate the behavior. And so like that is in recruiting, in sales, in design, in engineering, like it's agnostic. Like context is literally everything. It's everywhere. And it's funny, unfortunately, the industry that we're in right now, I always think recruiting as like a gold mining company. You know, no gold mining company today looks at a hill and says, that looks fantastic, Clark. Let's invest $2 million to start digging. And then realize, oh, well, there goes that money. So what they do is they analyze the surface, and underneath is what matters most. And so when you think about that analogy, you could think about what Rapha is doing. You're now not only able to uncover the hard skills, but the golden nuggets underneath. And being able to understand the context of who this person is in the first 10 seconds to make a better judgment call. Whether you want to invest in these sample profiles or continue on in another avenue.
Absolutely. So you don't just keep submitting and submitting. Like you either get in the right person early or you're able to recalibrate early, which is so important, right? Huge. And not have that wasted time.
That is huge. The recalibration, oh my God, especially when you scale up with all these bigger enterprise companies, those calibration calls cost like more than 10 grand an hour because you have a bunch of engineering heads, 5 recruiters, if not a little bit more, to understand the landscape of the engineering, when in reality, that HM can just simply add their make or break question in their question bank on Rapha and allow the recruiter to not know what binary trees are, right? And understand the bells and whistles behind it and just focus on being present for that applicant and making sure their story is heard and confirming with the HM and moving along.
You said something that I want to touch on that's really important for our recruiters listening to this, is that you calculated, you know, the hourly pay of everyone that has to be on that call. Like what does that extra hour look like? And man, that is such a good way for recruiters to sell against. Well, what's your current process? Are you able to get the right candidates? Well, what does that look like? Right? Who's involved in the decision-making process? Who's interviews? How many interviews had you have? Right? So you start to find out the interview process, how many candidates they've interviewed, who's gone to final, all that, and it hasn't worked out. You could actually reverse engineer the formula and the equation of, okay, you guys have done 60 total interviews, and you have these 6 titles that are part of the interview process. Right? You guys haven't hired anyone. Right? That's, you know, that's, as you said, $20, $30, $50, $60, $80,000 in just interview time alone, let alone when bring someone on and training time and all that stuff. So like just different ways for agency recruiters to start calculating that opportunity cost and really bringing that to the surface to companies is huge.
It's massive. And you're touching on in such a huge selling point for agencies. Now, going into these calibration calls, you can keep it async and basically on an email chain. Feel free to engage, like no need to take this prescription, but you're now able to get those burning questions directly from the HM. Have it be part of your application. When you go and speak to applicants, you're literally going to be speaking to the HM, and that HM is going to be listening to your answers directly. Feel free to get technical. Oftentimes, I've done the job as well. We'll segue that in a second. But oftentimes, technical folks love to maybe not dumb it down a little bit and not go too deep. When in reality, if they went a little bit further along, maybe a technical person would have uncovered that, oh, actually this is not a fit, or it is a fit, or maybe I need to move them along faster. So like it just serves a huge purpose for both the applicant, the recruiter and agency, as well as the HM.
Yeah, because I've had my fellow recruiters back recently because I know there's a lot of people that, you know, even like, you know, it's like, all right, I got the design product. I can talk about it better than the recruiter. I'm like, that's fine. But a lot of recruiters have also put in the work to figure out how to sell, how to communicate with hiring managers, right? They've done the dirty work of the job. So it's kind of that balance, right? There's subject matter expertise, but there's also, yeah, but you know, I go on 10 meetings a week. I know how to get business and like do the whole thing, right? The actual recruiting piece. So it's I see both sides. I work with both sides. But yeah, talk about your kind of, you dabbled a little bit in recruiting. Like kind of what did that look like? What was that experience like?
First of all, funny story. So I kind of sprinkled it in. in the beginning. But when I closed my first company, I was in that limbo phase, Clark. I was trying to figure out, I was like, oh, goddamn, like what am I going to do? I racked up amazing experience, but I want to keep building. I want to keep that muscle, that entrepreneurial muscle going. And my girlfriend, now wife now, was like, man, babe, to be honest, you can keep doing these crazy things. Maybe you should try recruiting. And I was like, what the heck is that? Like, I ain't even heard of that. Like, what is that? What are we doing? And where do we need to go? Type of thing.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, you pretty much did it. I'll never forget when she said that. And I was like, what do you mean I just did it? He was like, well, you hired your engineer from Egypt. You hired that salesperson. You hired that software engineer that you did. That's right. You did it. Congratulations. Welcome. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, what's the pay like? He was like, oh, the pay is pay. The pay's there. And I was like, oh, wow. So, and then I was like, okay, well, I kind of followed in my wife's footsteps. I was like, well, all right, show me where to go. And then dabbled into agencies and was able to do it on the side and fund my crazy projects. And I quickly learned, I was like, I have a huge competitive advantage when compared to my other counterparts. Because I'm a little bit more technical and I've actually worked with engineers on a daily basis. Shouts out to my co-founder, Marcelo. I know exactly what needs to happen. I know exactly what people are looking for. I know exactly how the hiring manager thinks nine times out of 10. And so it allowed me to be successful. So I had stints through vendors at Microsoft, Google, places like that. And I've seen agency life for startups as well as enterprise level of like all the inefficiencies that go through those processes. But I've seen it all. And I've been doing it for like a couple years to the point where I even dabbled into starting my own recruiting agency on the side. So like I literally seen how the sausage is made. And so that's why whenever I talk to customers, I was like, hey, also fun fact, I know what an RPO is. Surprise. Like I know what these things mean. Like I know exactly what ISIMS is. I've seen the beast. I've seen what they look like. So it's always fun to kind of connect with fellow agencies and recruiters who's like, hey, I've actually done a job. I know exactly the pain that you're going for or that you're going through. And so, yeah, that's kind of like how I fell into it. And like, it's so funny, like full circle. That was like maybe 6+ years ago, you know, and here we are today.
It's right. I mean, it's kind of a combination of all your experiences. And that's what I noticed with a lot of founders that kind of blend different things together. And, you know, it takes after a few years in the career. Now we have those prodigy founders and all that, and good for them, right? But some of the ones that I resonate with and I connect with, like yourself, it's like a blend of everything that you like learned into kind of a solution that makes sense now, right? Like the right timing, just the right timing, the right market, the right blend of you've been, you know, big companies, startups, a recruiter, product design, like kind of a blend of everything. You've been a job seeker, right? Like just everything kind of put together. So it's super cool, kind of the way all this kind of unfolded and come together. And Rapha's kind of a culmination, right, of a career in a sense of like, here's what I got. And the market is obviously responding in kind, which is super cool to see.
No, it definitely is. And I feel like Rapha is definitely my life's work in a nutshell, if you think about it, because I've been a candidate, you know, 99% of people on LinkedIn, 99% of your listeners right now were a candidate at one point. And
I've been a candidate.
Me too. I've been there. And so what's funny, we feel the same emotions when we get that auto reject at step one, and you think to yourself, man, if all I need is like for you to hear what I have to say. And I feel like HMs want that, recruiters want that, but unfortunately with the inefficiency, it doesn't allow them to even breathe for a second. But now we're creating this new world of hiring where you can take a step back while increasing your hires and quality at the same time and actually listen to people and hear their story and passion, allow their resume to speak volumes and go beyond the resume, if that. And so I think it's just so unique to see whenever I'm doing these demos, whenever I'm talking to founders, HMs, they just be like, oh, wow, okay. So, and I always ask them, and I'm gonna ask you this, Clark. What's that one burning question you typically love asking your candidates that allow you to get that color that you've been looking for to keep the conversation going?
For what would it be? Would it be for like digital recruiter, or would it be as a recruiter if I'm talking to a certain skill set?
The world is your oyster, my friend. Like whatever you like. It's a full buffet.
Ooh. I know. I'm so much more interpersonal. I'm less technical. I mean, I've brought on recruiters that I haven't even asked about their recruiting process because I care more about what they're looking for, what their current day to day is. So maybe, yeah. I mean, I guess if we ever bring on a 1099 recruiter, right, it's commission only. I'd be like, well, what does the next 6 months look like for you? Like, can you? What's the day to day? Like, do you have a 6 month runway to potentially build, and maybe you don't make a placement for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? Yeah. Like, are you going to be okay without paying? And I got to kind of know that, right? And so that would be, to me, that filters out what we're able to provide because that's just what works for us is to have that. And there's a certain type of person that is. They love that because they want to be remote. We have the systems. We can get the momentum really quickly. We have job orders and all that. They just have to be okay with the contingent life. A 1099. They're going to get way more of the placement they would anywhere else, but that's the trade-off, right? So that's probably what I would ask is, could you not make money from work for the next 6 months? Or like, what would that look like? Because otherwise... that's a big runway, but I want to make sure people think it through in their head, so it doesn't waste their time or our time. Yeah,
exactly. And so remember, time is everything.
That's it.
And so, you always come back to two things: context and time. Like that's the genre of today's episode. If you have those two,
absolutely,
you're a very rich person.
Yeah, with the right context, right, can give you the time back. So, well, let's end it here. What do you think what's the future of hiring look like, in your opinion?
I think we're going to be in a world where a resume is an afterthought. A resume is going to be something you're going to tell your grandchildren of how you used to apply. See, when I was a recruiter...
Like typewriters.
Yeah. So, like, when I was a recruiter, and I could speak to a good chunk of the population, you typically just read the first company name and how long you've been there. That's it. And then you jump on the call, you hope for the best. But all of a sudden, once you're in the process, Clark, that resume does not get brought up ever again. It's like an afterthought. Oh, well, I mean, you're here. Like, why would I look at this, right? And I'm also learned that a lot of these industry leaders care more about the contextual person versus what's on paper. So there is a path forward where Rapha can actually be one of the main ATSs, if not the only one, that you can actually get a hire without a resume. And I feel like that is where we're going because the lines are blended and everyone can have a great resume. Everyone looks good on paper, but the culture fit is what matters on top of the hard skills that we can capture. And so I feel like in the future of hiring, I feel like these resumes and how we've been applying is going to be something of the past that we're going to look back.
I'm with you. I have a few clients where I've never even sent a candidate resume to them because, number one, they just trust me, and I know them so well. I know who they're looking for, and I can just share a LinkedIn profile. And they're like, okay, with that context, and the profile, it's like, yeah, I'll talk to them. And that's it. And that's typically how, at least for me, when I'm recruiting, that's how I do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, just imagine, Clark, you're now able to not only see their profile, but actually understand who this person is, their behavioral, their contextual of who they are, their favorite project that they shipped in the last 6 months. What gets them up in the morning? And then all of a sudden, like, we're creating this marketplace where you're now able to hear people without needing to dedicate 30 minutes on both sides of the aisle. And you'll have more of a better judgment call than what you do now. So I feel like resumes are going to be a thing of the past. I feel like people are going to be speaking volumes through their social profiles. And Rapha will be able to capture that 3D blueprint of who that person is before you ever needing to jump on that call. And so I feel like the future is bright, especially with all the AI stuff that we have spinning, and it's pressure cooking people to increase the quality bar, and really the devil's in the details of who they're looking for. And so we're able to capture and be agnostic and survive any Ice Age, Warzone, or whatever it may be. You know, Rapha will definitely be here to support that.
I love that, man. Anything that raises the quality of hiring the industry, telling the story, giving that context, right, in a more effective time, I am here for, man. So I love it. I love the perspective. Love this conversation, dude. Getting to talk to you more. I'm excited to see you guys that keep building and keep talking to you and kind of see the growth. Just a cool story, man, and you're definitely the ones that get it. So, again, we could find you what? People connect with you on LinkedIn, check out Rapha, right? They want a demo, they can book a demo with you, right? Or your firm, yeah.
Yeah, hit me up any day of the week, Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week, 365, day or night. You say jump, I say how high. I'll be there.
That founder schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, the founder schedule. Blessings to my wife for like giving me the space to make it happen. But yeah, I'm happy to do any demo any day of the week. So excited to help people out.
Yeah, no, it's you're super responsive. Obviously, people can tell, easy to talk to. You know your stuff and building a cool product you're passionate about, and it works and it's effective. So check it out. We'll have the URL, the website, all that on the episode page. Make sure to kind of like, subscribe, 5 stars, all that fun stuff. Masoud, appreciate you coming on, man. This is awesome.